Okay, this is part 5 of Federalist 2. These two paragraphs, this little part is very important. That's why I started talking about this Federalist number 2 in the first video about what our priorities are as human beings. Are we going to group ourselves together in a certain way, or are we going to look at our shared common humanity? Let me read this. It's a beautiful, beautiful paragraph. With equal pleasure, I have as often taken notice that Providence has been pleased to give this one connected country to one united people, a people descended from the same ancestors, speaking the same language, professing the same religion, attached to the same principles of government, very similar in their manners and customs, and who, by their joint counsels, arms, and efforts, fighting side by side throughout a long and bloody war, have nobly established their general liberty and independence. This country and this people seem to have been made for each other, and it appears as if it was the design of Providence that an inheritance so proper and convenient for a band of brethren, united to each other by the strongest ties, should never be split into a number of unsocial, jealous, and alien sovereignties. John Jay constantly tries to remind the readers that we've been in a war together. All of us came together and fought the enemy. We've tried to defend ourselves all the time. So he wants to constantly bring their attention to the wars they've been in and how they united. Let's look at the end when he says a band of brethren united to each other by the strongest ties. He is alluding to a line from Shakespeare's Henry V, because there's a famous line in there that he says we have to unite, stay together like a band of brothers. And at the same time, notice he mentions Providence twice. A lot of the 18th century American intellectuals at the time, when you read a lot of their writings, especially the founders of this country, they would use Providence instead of God. And remember, Providence comes from the word provide, because it's that just kind of like I use the word Parvardigar in Farsi, the creator and sustainer of the universe. They, because of Enlightenment thought, they would look at they looked at the creation of the world not necessarily reflecting what maybe the Book of Old Testament said. So you have to keep in mind, we'll talk about it more, and then when you sit down and read the writings of Jefferson, Franklin, you will see kind of their religious view on things. One of the main reasons that I was very fortunate to go to the original documents, to the writing of the founders, some 20 some years ago, when I started finding interest in American history, is I bought this book, Norton Anthology of Literature, for $1. And I'll show the book to you. It's probably the best dollar I've spent in my life. And just thumbing through it, turning the pages, I came across a letter that Thomas Jefferson had written to his nephew, Peter Carr, August 10th, 1787. When you look at this, when you read this letter, it's a very nice letter. He is telling his nephew, when you read the Bible, when you come across a passage that right now doesn't seem reasonable to you, always question, always use your reason. And that led me into writing more and more of the founders, got interested in their view on religion, stuff like that. So nowadays the term, or even back then, the term they use is deist, D-E-I-S-T. That's how they refer to them as far as their religious beliefs. But we'll talk about it some more. It needs some explaining, especially if your heritage is not a Christian heritage. So we'll talk about it as we gradually go forward. So here is one of the things that John Jay says to remind the people of America. He says, you're descended from the same, you have the same heritage, you're English speakers. And he keeps on focusing on that. Whereas the interesting thing is that John Jay himself was of Dutch and French ancestry. And it is very interesting that he's pulling on the English heritage. He says we are all of the same heritage. That's why it's easy for us to unite. But he doesn't mention that at that time, approximately 10% of the white population of United States, or of the states back then, were of German heritage. He doesn't mention that. Another thing, sadly, we know why he doesn't bring it up, but 1 out of 5 people that lived in the 13 states were enslaved people. These are people that were brought from Africa. So he doesn't mention that. Fortunately for us, we have now come to a point that we see United States now, we see countries like Canada, where people of different backgrounds are together, and we don't have to necessarily use this paragraph as I've heard some people use it. I listened to this lady talk about the Federalist Papers, and he mentioned this paragraph, and he said, now we're letting inferior cultures come inside our country and ruin our country. So see, some people can pick this and unfortunately use it, abuse it, and try to cut other people down and make America like a country that was made only for white Christian people. Whereas when you read the history of America, the traditions were so different. When you look at different states, they had been here for over a century. Their tradition, even if they were the same, which they were not at the beginning, they had diverged, they had gone separately. Their religion was different. I often mention to people that the First Amendment of the United States, which guarantees religious freedom, freedom of conscience, was not put in there because they were afraid Jews or Buddhists or Hindus or Muslims were going to come and force Christians into some other belief. It was put in there because Christians didn't trust one another. Because Baptists could not trust the Anglicans. And you're talking about all different kinds of faiths. Gradually, the Methodists came in. Catholics were not accepted at all. So you're talking about multiple traditions. He, in a sense, because he wants to persuade the readers that, hey, we're alike, we just were in a bar, in a fight, we were in a war, we are so much alike, and we should not let ourselves be separated into different countries. So he's constantly focusing on the part that he wants you to focus on, which is what I would do, except now I would say, let's focus on our humanity. That's the most important thing about us. It's not where we come from. Those are important. It's not what language we talk. Because if a person speaks whatever kind of language you choose and they're not a good person, they're not a good person. Doesn't matter what language they speak, what religion they profess they believe in. So I think it was important for me to try to share this with you so that John Jay is using the moment to keep the people of the States to stay united. So he uses this heritage thing, whereas we know that people of different heritages can live together, prosper, do well, and lucky for us, after the Civil Rights Movement and after the 1965 Immigration Act, Naturalization Act, people from all over the world came to United States, and that's why United States looks like the whole world right now.